Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about my fight review and the UFC 298 card that ended up just recently happening, where I believe I ended up getting 3 out of 5 of my fight predictions correctly. I think that the first fight that ended up happening on this main card, between that of, I believe the guy's name was Anthony Hernandez and Roman Kopylov, I think that I ended up getting that one incorrect, and I think I also ended up getting the main event incorrect. But also, that being said, if you guys watched that of my fights prediction video, I said that Ilia Topuria, that this dude was none to fuck around with, that this dude was none to mess around with, and I said that this was a coin toss level fight, meaning what? That basically anyone that you picked in this fight, I couldn't disagree with it. Ilia Topuria, and I already stated this, he was going to be the biggest threat that Alexander Volkanovski had ever fought here at the 145-pound level. He was going to be the most talented fighter that he had ever fought. And, that's not me stating necessarily that Ilia Topuria is greater than Jose Aldo or Max Holloway, especially as of yet. That's not what I'm saying. But when Alexander Volkanovski did fight Jose Aldo, I wouldn't really say that he was quite the same fighter he was when he was the championship level fighter, such as when Conor McGregor beat him. I would still say that he was an A grade level fighter, but he clearly had been a little bit more mentally beat down because of some of the losses that he had suffered. Chad Mendez, very good fighter, but he's always a guy that ends up losing some of the bigger fights, even though he's extremely talented. And Max Holloway, even though he's a great fighter as well, he's a little bit overrated, especially as a striker. There's a reason why Max Holloway, every single time he gets into one of his big fights against a guy that can handle his size and a guy that can handle his height and his reach over them, especially at the 145-pound weight division, or when he fought Dustin Poirier or Alexander Volkanovski, that he usually got completely outstruck and chewed up against those guys. Because Max Holloway, and I've been stating this for years, even though he's truly a great champion, or was, and a great fighter, and he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, he was one of the more overrated champions and overrated fighters in that of the UFC, at least when you talk about his skill set. It just is what it is. And I have a certain amount of the Max Holloway fans and, them that come after me when I state that. But every single time that Max Holloway has usually been in the ring against a fighter that also has great striking ability and can handle his height and reach, Conor McGregor, Volkanovski, Dustin Poirier, he usually loses those fights. There's a reason for that. It is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it, once again, for those of you that did not hear about the results, Alexander Volkanovski ended up getting knocked out within that of the second round. And I predicted Volkanovski, I believe, to win by that of decision. But I'm not surprised whatsoever that Ilia Topuria ended up winning this fight. I can't say that I ended up getting my prediction right, but I did say overall that Ilia Topuria, that this dude was nothing to mess around with. I said that in my fight prediction video, my fight breakdown video. This was going to be probably the most dangerous opponent that he had ever fought at 145. And when you take a look at Ilia Topuria, you can very clearly tell that he has a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. And on top of that, you can tell that, you can tell, at least if you've been boxing or if you've watched boxing for a very long time, you can also take a look at certain MMA fighters and when they have a boxing background, like Dustin Poirier or Conor McGregor, even a little bit of Alexander Volkanovski possibly. Ilia Topuria might be debatably the best boxer that I've ever seen inside the UFC's history. He might be the best boxer that I've personally ever seen. And, I know that this is only coming off of one win, but, even if he doesn't retain his title in his next fight, Ilia Topuria might be the best boxer that I've personally ever seen in UFC, at least when it just comes, of course, obviously to hand-to-hand combat. His strikes are very smooth. There's nothing advertised about his strikes a lot of the times. He's very fast. He's very decently powerful. He's always changing levels and he's always moving his head side to side, but not too far in order to run into a kick or in order to run into a knee. And this is why I also state that in an MMA fight, even though, of course, you have many different martial arts, Taekwondo, karate, or karate, however you want to pronounce it, Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling and Sambo and all sort of stuff, boxing is still a very important martial art for, a lot of these MMA fighters to learn. And the reason why that is because you will not find a better hand-to-hand combat striker, which is usually a big part of these fights. You will not find a better hand-to-hand combat striker than that of a boxer. And you can tell that Ilia Topuria, that he has great boxing, a great boxing background. It just is what it is. Now, why, in my view, did Alexander Volkanovski get knocked out in this fight? because he did do a lot of the things that I said that he was going to have to do, especially going after those legs with the kicks early on to take away Ilia's speed and to take away his range of motion. I think that he was doing the correct thing there, but unfortunately for Volkanovski, I think one of two things, if not both of them, probably happen here. First of all, Volkanovski, and I've been stating this about him, even for the great fighter that he is, the all-time great fighter that in my view that Volkanovski is, and the highly skilled fighter that Volkanovski is. A big problem that he has, especially when he's striking, and this is why a certain amount of fighters are especially able to catch him with that right cross at the end of certain exchanges. Volkanovski, when he's moving back, a lot of the times he doesn't change levels and he doesn't move his head very well. And a lot of the times he just moves his head back and he kind of just bends back a little bit. Well, if your opponent is basically going in a linear line just as you, and if they're fast enough or if they have a long enough reach, they can catch you with that right hand. And if you take a look in some of Volkanovski's fights, there's a reason why sometimes he gets hits with those right hands. And what's the thing that ended up knocking out Volkanovski in this fight? It was a right hook. All right, it was a right hook because Volkanovski ended up getting backed up against the cage. He didn't move laterally. He moved in a straight linear line, which is something that you're not supposed to do. That is a big fault in a lot of MMA fighters and also certain boxers as well. That's something in boxing that you're taught not to do. You have to move laterally, at least at certain times. Now, in MMA, you have to be also a little bit careful because you might run into a kick or you might run over or something into that. So, you have to be a little bit more careful in MMA as well. But Volkanovski, once again, should have moved his head a little bit more when it came down to it. And overall, he should have really found a better way to avoid that punch. The reason why he ended up getting knocked out in this fight, or at least hit with that punch in the first place, is because Ilia Topuria backed him up. He moved in a straight linear line backwards, and he didn't move his head. He didn't change the levels. So it was very easy for Ilia Topuria to land that punch because he already knew where Volkanovski's head was going to be. So it is what it is. But anyways, do I also believe potentially that it could be possible that Volkanovski, that he just no longer has the chin or, no longer is the fighter that he once was because of the knockout loss to Islam Makhachev? I think that that's very possible because Volkanovski, he had never been knocked out before. And, I'm not going to say that it was the worst knockout loss that I had ever seen, but it definitely, when a lot of fighters, especially when they've never been stopped before, it makes them lose a lot of their confidence. Because even if they end up losing a fight by decision, it might end up losing their confidence a little bit, but if you end up getting stopped in a fight before, you even had a little bit of confidence, even if you lost a decision, because, you could still do kind of the same things before overall, because at least you didn't get stopped. At least you know that you can take a punch. But once you start getting knocked out and once you start getting stopped in some of these fights, it makes you overthink, it makes you second guess, and it makes your skill set a lot of the times, fall down a little bit. Now, Volkanovski, in my view, was actually winning this fight before Ilia Topuria ended up knocking him out. But like I stated, Volkanovski was going to have to move a little bit better in this fight, especially with his head. It didn't happen. It's unfortunate, and this is a fault that you see with a lot of MMA fighters. They don't change levels enough, and they don't move their head quite enough. They can be a little bit too straightforward. Now, a lot of the times, this is also a little bit more necessary because you want to run into a knee or a kick. You have to be very careful because at times you could be running straight into something. So you can't necessarily have the same range of motion as a boxer. But Ilia Topuria, once again, you can tell that he has a great boxing background and he moves perfectly. Not just for, for a very good boxing background, but he also moves perfectly for an MMA fighter because he's always moving his head off the center line, but he's not doing it too far to the point overall to where he's going to run into a kick or run into a knee. So Ilia Topuria should really be an example, in my view, if you're a professional MMA fighter, or an MMA fighter or training in martial arts, period. He really should be an example for you. What does he do correctly? He does not advertise his punches. He's very quick. He's very in and out. He has his hands up constantly. He's always changing levels. He's always moving his head. When it comes down to it, he knows how to use his feet. All right, when it comes down to it. And on top of that, he has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This man is a bad man. All right, and I've been saying it now for a couple of years that this dude is none to mess around with. This dude right here was going to be the most dangerous opponent potentially for Alexander Volkanovski, and I ended up being right on the money. Now, once again, Alexander Volkanovski, I did predict him to win, so I ended up getting my main event prediction wrong. But like I said, Volkanovski, unfortunately, he had certain things overall that I thought was going to make him potentially the better fighter, and I think that both at their best, you could probably still argue that Volkanovski is probably the better all-around fighter. But this is why you have to be very careful, especially when you're going into hand-to-hand combat. You have to know who you're fighting, and I think that Volkanovski, in my view, if it would have been a better game plan, that he would have really tried, to mix this up and make it a little bit more of a dirty fight by pushing Ilia back a little bit more, in my personal view, and really trying to make this a little bit more of a grappling match and a wrestling match. Because this dude, Alexander Volkanovski, and I was saying that he was going to have to be very careful, and he knew from round one that, he couldn't just go in there and strike against this guy like some of the other guys. He was very wary of his striking ability, but I think that, that he thought that he was a better boxer than Ilia Topuria. He is not a better boxer than Ilia Topuria. It just is what it is. When it comes down to it, there is no one in that weight division overall that is a better boxer than Ilia Topuria. Not Max Holloway, not Alexander Volkanovski, not Brian Ortega, not any of those guys. There is no better boxer in that weight division than that of Ilia Topuria. All right? It is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it, what I will say once again is that it could be also potentially that Alexander Volkanovski, that, his chin could be a little bit more shot, because I had never personally, once again, seen his chin fall under like that before, even when in the past he was hit against certain shots. But it could be just the age. It could also be the fact that he got knocked out in his last fight. Or it could just be that Ilia Topuria, that he hit him with a shot that Alexander Volkanovski really didn't see coming. It could just really be that. Once again, this kid, he has a lot of power. He's very quick, excellent striking ability, especially with his hands. Just very talented, so good on him. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for the breakdown for the Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria fight. As for the other fights, the Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa fight, that fight pretty much went down as I expected it to go. Robert Whittaker was going to be a little bit too technical and fast for that of Paulo Costa. I've always said about Paulo Costa, in my view, that he's pretty much a great brawler. He's a one-dimensional fighter. He's a person that pretty much against the elite fighters and good strikers, that he's pretty much lost against them. Because in my view, Paulo Costa, he doesn't have much answers if he's not able to push you up against the cage and, basically barrage you. He doesn't really have much answers outside of that. He's not the most technical fighter. Now, he did give him a little bit of a tough fight in the first round, especially, with that spinning heel kick. But other than that, I thought Robert Whittaker pretty much took the whole entire fight. So I believe Whittaker to win by unanimous decision. I believe I ended up getting that correctly. In that of the Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal fight, I think that Ian Gary, I don't think that it was the most impressive showing. I thought that he could have showed his striking a little bit more. He's also going to have to be a little bit careful, because his head at times doesn't really change levels as much as what it needs to. And he sometimes also backs into a linear line a little bit too much, although he does circle off a little bit more, so good on him. But I thought that he just threw a little bit more. Jeff Neal, once again, he's a decent striker, but he also does not change levels very well. He also does not move laterally very well. He at times can also move very linear, and he didn't throw enough in this fight. So Ian Gary, in my view, he just won the fight. I believe I got that one right by decision. And then the other one, Henry Cejudo versus that of Merab, the Georgian fighter. Henry Cejudo was very close overall in some of those rounds, and then the first round, of course, he clearly won. But Merab, once again, that dude's a cardio horse, like I stated. That dude is like one of those Dagestanis. Those Europeans over there, those guys from, from those areas like Dagestan, Georgia, and some of those other guys, those guys are cardio horses. They can be excellent wrestlers. And Merab also comes from the same camp as Chris Weidman and Aljamain Sterling, which is, pretty much a wrestling camp, or a highly touted wrestling camp. Weidman and Aljamain Sterling and Merab, they're all known for their elite level wrestling. And that is clearly, in my view, the guy that is going to be the biggest threat to that is Sean O'Malley, if he's able to even beat that Achito Marlon Vera, I believe. But that dude definitely is a cardio horse. He basically reminds me of a smaller version of Colby Covington. I wouldn't say that he's the most articulate striker on the planet Earth, but when he does beat you, it's going to be because of his complete volume, and his intelligence as a fighter. And on top of that, just his tenacity. He's going to be throwing a lot of leg kicks. He's going to be throwing certain strikes, sometimes on the retreat or when you come at him. And he's going to be trying to brawl with you with the wrestling. That's who he reminds me of. He reminds me of a smaller version of Colby Covington. Will that be enough to get Sean O'Malley out of there or beat him? We'll see. We'll see. Because Sean O'Malley actually did react to Aljamain Sterling's wrestling, pretty decently. But Merab, he could potentially be even a better wrestler than Aljamain Sterling. So we'll see on that. As of Kopylov versus Anthony Hernandez, I believe that I predicted Kopylov because I thought that his takedown defense was going to be a little bit better. But like I also stated about Kopylov, if you've watched some of his fights, that two of his biggest weaknesses at times have been a little bit of the grappling game. But not only that, even though he's a great striker on the front foot, on the back foot, a lot of the times he doesn't have any answers. And he also moves way too linearly. He keeps his hands down and he panics a lot if you're able to actually push him back. He's very good on the front foot, but on the back foot, a lot of the times he's very clueless. So even though I predicted Kopylov to win, I'm not really surprised that he ended up losing that fight. And of course, the grappling once again proved to be a bit too much for him. And Anthony Hernandez pushing him back, which in my view, this was a very winnable fight for Kopylov. But he just doesn't have those two abilities. He doesn't have great grappling ability. And on top of that, he's just not good on the back foot. And that's why Kopylov, even for the great striking and clearly great athletic talent that he has, he might debatably be the most talented athlete at that weight division. He might debatably be the most talented athlete there because he's so powerful and so fast. But he's almost overall like the Russian version of Uriah Hall. Extremely great athlete, but overall just does not quite have the fight IQ nor the skills to really ever become a champion. It just is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it. As for the potentiality of there being a Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria rematch, I would more than likely see Topuria winning a rematch just because he ended up stopping Volkanovski. But a fight that I would really love to see also would be Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Even though apparently Topuria recently, as of recent, stated that he wasn't going to give Max Holloway a chance or any of the old contenders. But he is going to have to give some of those guys a chance. Dana White's going to make him face some of those guys. But we'll see what ends up happening there. But anyways, very, very, very interesting card. Very interesting series of fights. And once again, this goes to show you that even though in a street fight, MMA and a lot of this ground game also is, in Muay Thai and all this sort of stuff, it also can be very useful. Boxing is still a great martial art to learn. That's why Sean O'Malley ended up winning his fight against Aljamain Sterling. That's why Conor McGregor won his fight against Jose Aldo. And that's why Ilia Topuria ended up winning his fight against Alexander Volkanovski. Now, of course, it's not always, going to get you there, especially if you're facing an elite level fighter with ground game like that of Charles Oliveira or something like that of Islam Makhachev or Khabib Nurmagomedov. But MMA fighters, in my view, they should be studying fighters like Ilia Topuria for their boxing ability and other fighters for their boxing ability, maybe like that of Volkanovski or Dustin Poirier or Conor McGregor at least at certain times, and maybe some other fighters, Anderson Silva, and some other guys as well that maybe I'm not mentioning. And for the ground game ability, certain guys like Georges St. Pierre, Daniel Cormier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kamaru Usman, certain people like that, Colby Covington. In my view, both of those martial arts are very important to learn. In my view, just in my personal view, the 5 martial arts that, in my view, that you might want to practice in, at least overall if someone were to become a professional MMA fighter, would be boxing, wrestling, including possible Sambo. Of course, that is the Russian overall or somewhat Greco-Roman style of Olympic wrestling, I believe. But that of boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and Taekwondo. In my view, those are the martial arts that, you should be learning overall if you wanted to be the best all-around fighter. But this Ilia Topuria dude, very dangerous fighter. Very great fighter. But anyways, I just thought that I would talk about that. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just thought that I would comment on that. Very interesting set of fights. Very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.